Welcome back to the Free Tendies head coach episode for week 4 of the NFL season. We missed our upload last week because I'm a bum, but we're back and better than ever. How's it going, Yanni?
What's up, man?
All right, let's get into the games.
Okay, first game in London, early game. Might not be the most exciting game. Maybe it is. You have the Falcons with an implied point total of 20.25 versus the Jaguars at 23.25 implied total. This game's in London, so the teams tend to be a little sluggish. It's early, but we'll see. For the Falcons, and you really can't trust anyone at this point in the year in terms of their pass catchers. So you're rolling out Bijan Robinson. Tyler Allgeier's too inconsistent. Desmond Ritter's not startable. Kyle Pitts, there's probably rosters where you have to start him. He's getting just barely enough in PPR that he's startable. But with how good tight ends have been, I figure that's a tricky decision. With the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, you're starting for now. Keep an eye on him, though. I know some people are starting to make contingencies. I might be starting CJ Stroud over him in one league. We're going to see. But I think for this week, he's a start. ETN, you're starting. Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, those are all starts. It should be enough offensive output there. Christian Kirk's a tricky decision. He's been breaking out a little bit, but that's been with Zay Jones out. I think if Zay Jones is healthy, you're probably sitting him. But for now, he's certainly a flexible player.
Yeah, I would call Christian Kirk a start if Zay Jones is out. And we after week 1, we called Christian Kirk a drop. So makes me feel like a big dumb stooge, but that's okay.
Well, but barring injury, so he's like a handcuffed wide receiver. There's no shame in calling that guy.
And then, how sit are you on Drake London? Are you just no shot, or
how can you predict what his spike weeks and what his down weeks are going to be? You can roll him out and you might get a spike week, but I would look at any other. I'd rather start like Nico Collins over Drake London.
Say there may or may not be a league where I have Cooper Kupp and my other wide receiver option is Darnell Mooney, so I'm starting Drake London this week. I was just trying some positive reinforcement for my team that's in the dumpster right now.
I don't think I think it's like one of those things where he's either going to be like a low end flex to a low end wide receiver too, or he's going to be a dud. And like you could start guys like that; they're nerve wracking. But I would assume there's rosters where they have to start him. He went between 40 and 50 most of my drafts.
That is a fascinating roster. Week 1 of this year, I started 4 goose eggs and still won. My matchup week 1. And I've had at least 1 goose egg in my lineup on that team every single week so far. So, yeah. Don't do it, Drake London. All right, next we got the probably I'd say the game of the week with the Dolphins and the Bills. The Dolphins have an implied team total of like 25 points, and the Bills are looking at about 28 points. For the Dolphins, our tricky decisions are A-Chain and Raheem Mostert. I'll talk about them in a second.
I was gonna say, dude, I've got to press you a little bit. Why is Raheem a tricky decision? This one's. We agree. He is our most hated player in fantasy this year. I loathe him, but I'd like to hear your reasoning. Why is he not a start?
All right, you want it now before I do everything else? Here's the deal. Here's the deal. Raheem Mostert is made of paper mache. He's 31 years old, and this is a good Bills defense. They actually, oddly enough, right now they give up like the number 1 yards per carry to running backs. So that is something to pay attention to. But A-Chain just came out and ran for 200 yards against the Broncos, and I think that's going to command more. That's going to command more playing time. I don't think that this game is going to be as high scoring as everybody thinks it is. I know that's kind of against the grain here. It's the highest. It's the highest total of the week, but it wouldn't shock me to see like I don't know a slower type of game. And I think that when you're getting like, I think A-Chain's going to command at least like 30 to 40% of the carries here. So you're going in a backfield split and potentially a lower scoring game than you think. I put him as tricky decision because I don't think he's the smash that everybody thinks he is for the first 3 weeks. He still could be decent. I think you could still flex him, but like he is not. I don't like him as an RB1. And then just on top of that, after this week, I think Jeff Wilson should be back next week. So then that backfield becomes a disgusting 3-headed monster. So I think this was your sell window on Raheem Mostert. I think it's if you were going to sell him for, I don't know, Jamar Chase, your window's going to be closed here very soon. But we're starting everyone else on the Dolphins. Yeah, you can't sit them. It's just too good right now.
Yeah.
For the Bills, we're starting everyone except for Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. They almost feel like Kincaid and Knox feel like they eat into each other's production. So while they're both in, you can't start either of them. um, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not sold on the Dolphins defense right now. I think they can be run on, so I think James Cook is fine. James Cook won't be able to get into the end zone. He's not going to be getting the goal line, but if he, he has a chance to get there from in between the 20s. So I think that's fine. Josh Allen, fantasy quarterback one in my heart. Stephon Diggs, he's a monster. Gabe Davis is always liable to break one off. I guess you could almost put Gabe Davis in tricky decision because he could easily give you 2 or 3 points in a week. That's just what Gabe Davis does. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I like all the Bills' weapons this week, and it should be a close one. Do you have anything on this game, Yanni, you wanted to add?
Nope. No, you got it. Okay, in a barn burner, we have the Texans coming in at around 19 points compared to the Steelers at around 22. For the Texans, I think you're rolling out Tank Dell and Nico Collins at this point until there was some interesting statistics about how Tank Dell is taking the first read option on plays. So that the first option that Stroud looks at, the percentage is really flipped from Nico Collins to Tank Dell. So there's some debate about who the alpha in that offense is. Personally, I think they're both going to get their looks. I think there's such a degree of passing volume there that they can both eat. They kind of are different players. You sort of have more of like a route runner and a possession guy and like an over-the-top guy. And we've seen plenty of systems sustain those two kind of guys. So I think you're rolling them both out. Steelers have actually been a little bit vulnerable this year in both the pass and the rush. Their defense hasn't been quite as steady as it's been in past years. They're getting turnovers, but it's not like a brick wall. And on that note, CJ Stroud, I think there's a lot of leagues where you're going to look at starting him this week. I think people more and more, we had him on our free agent pickups a while ago because of the passing volume, because he's actually looked very solid. He offers a little bit of rushing upside, so he's a tricky decision. And Damian Pierce, there's some debate between me and Ted about whether he's a start or a tricky decision this week. Ted wants him as a tricky decision. I'm closer to a start, but I do understand. I mean, he's been so unproductive. I think there's a lot of rosters where you're probably rolling him out, but I think you should also look around for better options. For the Steelers, you're starting Pickens and Freiermuth while the receiving core is so damaged. Those two guys are really concentrated nicely in there. And then for their running backs, it is Houston. They do hemorrhage rushing yards. They are a rush funnel defense, and you have Najee and Jalen Warren. Kind of unclear who's going to be there. Jalen Warren's getting the more high-value touches right now. He's getting those kind of check downs on third down or those swing routes or whatever else. He's getting more targets, but Najee's getting a lot of the work on early downs, probably more likely to get red zone work. They're both tricky decisions depending on your roster. I don't know if you're thrilled to start either one.
Yeah, I would say for the Steelers backfield, if you're getting a true split on a team that is not a great offense and does not do particularly well running the ball, that they're automatically a tricky decision. Like, it's a plus matchup against the Texans, but I mean, I think you'd be happy with 10 from either of them this game.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, next we got Sean McVay and the Rams going into Indy to play the Colts. The Rams have an implied team total of like 23, and the Colts have an implied team total of about 26 points. Our starts for the Rams are Stafford, Puka, and Tutu Atwell, and our tricky decisions are Higbee and Kyron Williams. So far this season, the Colts have been hemorrhaging pass yards to all the teams that they've played. Baltimore kind of had a tough go of it last week because it was kind of a rainy, sloppy game. We'll talk more about that later in the week for the gambling episode because one of us might have picked the Ravens to cover 9.5 points and then lost outright to the Colts. But yeah, that'll be for later. But yeah, all of our key passing attack guys from the Rams are starts because it's what they do well. It really is what they do well, and that's also kind of why we have Kyron Williams as a tricky decision. So far this year, the Colts have been pretty good against the rush, like in terms of running backs, right? Like Lamar just ran for 100 yards on him last week, but that's different than like a running back out of the backfield. And Kyron Williams is not good at football. He gets opportunity, but he's not that good. I have him as tricky decision just because like he might catch a couple of dump offs from Stafford and get home that way. And Higby, kind of the same idea. Like he's not that great, but they should be throwing a lot, so he could catch a couple balls. Who knows? For the Colts, our starts are Pittman, Zach Moss, and Anthony Richardson. I owe Zach Moss an apology. Last week I said he was not good at football, and the Ravens stuffed the run, and he looked great. Out of all the bad running backs that we've had to see this year, he looked the best, and he's getting like all of the work. So fire him up, fire up Zach Moss, RB1, I guess. And yeah, right now Richardson, like it says he's questionable, but he's practiced the last 2 days. He's gonna go. Um, you got to start him. The baby Jalen Hurts. Let's go. You got anything on this one you wanted to add, Johnny?
No, just Richardson. There was an interesting stat I saw this week about fantasy points per snap taken. He currently leads the NFL. So, yeah, you're starting him when he's out there.
Yeah. You think like okay? Would you trade Brees Hall for Anthony Richardson?
It would depend on the rest of my roster.
But you considered it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
He's getting in that like. Yeah, he's got a lot of value. It was interesting before the year that he was drafted a lot higher. The more money the league buy-in was, the higher his draft position was. So he's one of those guys that like the Sharks were, the Whales were all in on. They were right. Yeah, that's all. Nothing.
He's 2 games into his NFL career. I think he's a borderline top 10 quarterback right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which is insane. Yeah.
Okay. We have Vikings and Panthers next. Vikings coming in with an implied total of around 25. Panthers around 21. For your starts for the Vikings, pretty straightforward. You're rolling out almost everyone. Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Madison, Hawkinson, Addison. In daily fantasy or in like 14, 16 team leagues, you can even look at KJ Osborne. He's pretty productive, in smash spots. The general idea being the Panthers are going to give up a lot of points in this one. Then the Vikings are a high-powered offense. They're desperate. They're 0-3. They've been, Justin Jefferson's coming out talking about the trade rumors. They're frustrated. I think you can feel pretty good about starting all their guys. For the Panthers, my theme is less so than Ted, but I've been banging the drum all year. I am not a Bryce Young fan. I do not think he's an NFL quarterback. I simply don't. You saw like Adam Thielen have a little bit of prominence with Andy Dalton. Miles Sanders is your only start for this team this week. Adam Thielen's a tricky decision simply because he has put up so many points the last 2 weeks. But expect his ceiling to be capped because now Bryce Young's back. And on that note, Bryce Young is a sit. And you're sitting the rest of the roster. Miles Sanders is one of the most highly used running backs in terms of passing down work and receiving usage in football right now. So, again, kind of have to start him. Temper your expectations with the Panthers in general. I think Bryce Young really limits the ceiling of an offense like that, even in a smash spot where you're going against the Vikings. It's a bad defense. It's a high-scoring game. You would think that it would be pretty good for Panthers pass catchers, but we don't think so.
I got one question for you on this game. Are you worried about Cam Akers eating into Madison's workload this week? He was inactive last week after the trade because KOC said he wasn't ready. He should be ready to go in some capacity this week. And the Panthers, they just gave up like 37 to the Hawks or whatever. But they do have a solid D line with Brian Burns and Derek Brown. Like they got a couple guys up there. So I mean I don't know. I still like Madison this week, but at the same time, if we start seeing Cam Akers, especially this week, getting significant work, sounding the alarms on Madison. He may or may not have been featured in a buy low, and I might have bought low on him, and I might have just been disgusted by the Cam Akers trade.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he's been a guy that we've talked about a little bit between the two of us this year. I would say I just didn't include Akers yet because I have no idea how. To me, it's not really. I'm not projecting anything on him yet because we haven't seen him. So I just think you treat it like you treated Kareem Hunt with Jerome Ford last week. We'll worry about it next week. Be interested to see. It's kind of interesting to see if they run those stretch zone runs like in the Shanahan scheme. And, O'Connell was an offensive coordinator for the Rams. Kind of interesting. That system does fit a Cam Akers way better than an Alexander Madison. So it may be that Akers gets in that system and we see that guy from the last 4 or 5 games last year. Certainly not improbable. We just don't know yet.
Fair enough.
So
All right, next we got the Jameis Winston revenge game. Tampa Bay is going into New Orleans to play the Saints. The Bucks have an implied team total of 18.75, which is very low, and the Saints have an implied team total of 21.75, which is also very low. Our sits for this week on the Bucks are Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin, and Rashad White. We told you guys. We told you. We told you last week. It is happening now. Sit Baker Mayfield, sit Chris Godwin, sit Rashad White. If you unloaded them for something, you won. You won. If you still have them, it is what it is. But we told you.
you tried so hard this offseason to talk me off my Chris Godwin. It kills me to see him down there. I have him on two of my best rosters. Have Chris Godwin this year, and if I had made a better decision, they would be such better rosters. It kills me, but you were absolutely correct. He was a volume-based receiver, and when you have the quarterback that had the most throws in the NFL for like 3 seasons straight, that was great. And Jameis Winston, who the same, but now that that's gone, the volume's simply not there to support Chris Godwin anymore.
And the crazy thing about that whole thing, I would say, is I think Baker's better than I thought he would be this year. Like, he's not the worst quarterback in the league. Like, my projection of this team was Baker is the worst quarterback in the league, and nobody will have value on this team. I think he's been a nice surprise, but he's going up against the Saints, who I believe they have 12 straight games of not allowing more than 20 points. It's just going to be tough sledding.
They're truly one of the good defenses in the NFL.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then our tricky decision is Mike Evans because he's gone off before. He seems to be Baker's favorite target. If anybody's going to do it on this offense, it's going to be him. So, I mean, take a look. Depending on your roster, you may or may not have another option to put in there. For the Saints, it looks like Derek Carr is not going to play. So our starts are just Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara. Our tricky decision is Michael Thomas, and we're just sitting everybody else. So here's the deal with this. Like, Jameis, it's going to be Jameis's game. Derek Carr has a sprained AC joint. He's going to be out for a couple weeks minimum. I think that if given the opportunity, Jameis could actually be able to distribute the ball, get it to the guys, and feed multiple fantasy assets. I don't think that Dennis Allen is going to let him. I think that the play calling from Dennis Allen, especially since he is the backup, is going to be very conservative and boring run pass type of stuff. So I almost lean Olave, even though Olave's a stud. He's an absolute stud. You've seen it. He hasn't gotten in the end zone yet, but you've seen him just make incredible grab after incredible grab. You've seen him have massive target volume this year. So like all signs are pointing to like wanting to start Chris Olave. I would just urge you guys, like, be careful. I almost have him as a tricky decision, and I have heavy bags on Olave this year. I just, when Dennis Allen's your coach, things can get tight and gross and defensive minded, and yeah, I'll talk more about the Saints on our gambling episode. I have a lot to say about them after watching their game against the Packers last week.
So just here's my Olave pitch. Is he's one of the best deep receivers in the NFL. That's actually really his bag. Jameis loves to air it out. We just saw the Bucks get ripped apart by AJ Brown. I think he's a good start this week.
I know Jameis loves to air it out. I don't think. I'm not saying I
You
absolutely.
don't know how productive the airing it out is.
No, it's not that. I don't think Dennis Allen will let him. I think that Dennis Allen, like, did you watch the end? I guess like spoiler alert to the next episode, but did you watch like the Packers Saints game when Derek Carr went down?
No, I couldn't watch that game.
Okay. So I watched it because it was one of my bets. And after Derek Carr went down, the Saints had 5 straight drives with like 3 or 4 plays apiece and punt. They just had super conservative short play call. They didn't even sniff a first down. Then the Packers had come back from 17-0 down. They took the lead, and then like on a 2-minute drill or whatever, Jameis drove it all the way down into field goal range. So that shows me that he absolutely can do it if they give him the keys. But I don't think Dennis Allen gives him the keys because I think he's a stooge and a bad coach. But that's just like my weird gigabrain read. So we'll see. Jameis could come out and like have a I don't know, 30-point fantasy quarterback game in the revenge game, and I could look stupid. But I do have a pick on this game for the gambling show.
All right. Okay, next game, Commanders coming in at 17.5 at the Eagles coming in at 26. The Eagles have one of the highest implied point totals of the week. For the Commanders, you're starting Brian Robinson Jr. We have a tricky decision on Brian Robinson Jr. You're probably starting him in most rosters, but he is a tricky decision. I think ECR has him somewhere around 18, 19 this week. For the wide receivers, we have Terry and Dotson as tricky decisions. That's kind of just a reflection of what we think the game script will be. Howell has been so unbelievably bad that he's essentially wrecked the value of those two guys this year. Terry's had one good game, Dotson's had none, and really neither one's been consistent. But this is a good game script. It is a game where they should be passing a lot. Use your discretion. For starts coming back at him with the Eagles, you have Hurts, Swift, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. You're not sitting your studs ever. Your sit is Gainwell, and then your tricky decisions, Dallas Goedert. And this one's just worth mentioning that he went 6th, 7th round in a lot of drafts. Jalen has really seemed to, one, be preferring his wide receivers in his target share, and two, it does seem like they're really happy to lean on Swift. I mean, they're getting their running backs like last time I checked, it was like 30 to 40 touches a game. It's really abnormal compared to their last year. Not abnormal, it's just different than their last year. And I think that's really hurting Goddard. Goddard was the second most used guy in the passing game until he got hurt like week 12 last year. And his production's really fallen off to the point where I've seen him dropped in a couple leagues. It's kind of wild. So he's a tricky decision this week.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add on to that. I guess the only thing I could say is we were talking last week about how there were two survivors on the island between Swift and Gainwell. It's over. It's over. DeAndre Swift won. He is the guy.
Well, so an important note about that. In production, it's over. Not in Snapshare. In Snapshare, they were 1A, 1B last week. I just think I think it's noteworthy because the perception is right that they're really split. But Nick Sirianni seems content to give them 50% of the snaps. But yes, it is over from like a talent and production standpoint. It's not close anymore.
I think from that game, as soon as Swift got going, Sirianni just left him in. I think that now that he's seen Kenny Gainwell and Swift next to each other and sees the difference between Swift and Gainwell,
Yeah.
it's gonna be one in a distant two. But we finally have some. It took us a month, but we finally have like the clarity we were looking for in the Eagles' backfield. Swift is your starter. Kenny is your handcuff. Penny doesn't matter, and Boston Scott, I don't know, also doesn't matter, I guess. All right, next we have the game of the week. The Denver Broncos going into Chicago to play the Bears. The Broncos have an implied team total of about 25 points, and the Bears have an implied team total of about 21 points. Our starts for the Broncos are Mr. Unlimited, Cortland Sutton, and Jerry Jeudy, which is a lot of starts for this team. But like we've said, it's the Bears. This is like the best fantasy matchup you could possibly have. And I see them having a decent day. Our tricky decisions are Marvin Mims and Javonte Williams. Marvin Mims is a player that maybe sees 8 to 9 snaps a game, but he has taken those 8 to 9 snaps and done the absolute most with it. He reminds me of like Robbie Anderson from the Jets. So if you just want to throw a dart, like you could easily come up with 0 points from Marvin Mims, but he could get some fluky like long touchdown and like just get you 15 fantasy points out of nowhere. And then Javonte Williams, like he's still coming back from his knee injury. The Broncos' run game hasn't been too inspiring, but it's the Bears, so I think he's worth a shout. For the Bears, our start of the week is Khalil Herbert, and that's it. The Broncos have given up the most fantasy points to running backs 2 weeks in a row now. Last week, I believe they let A-Chain put up like 30 or 40 points, and they let Mostert put up like 40 points. They give up 80 points to fantasy running backs last week. Then the week before that, they made Brian Robinson look like Barry Sanders. It was crazy. So yes, this Broncos defense stinks. This Broncos run defense stinks. And Khalil Herbert is supposed to be the starter for the Bears. So this is the best matchup he'll have all year. Fire him up. Our tricky decisions are Roshan Johnson, DJ Moore, and Justin Fields. Roshan we put in here because a lot of people love his talent, and the Broncos just gave up two 40-plus fantasy point games to two different running backs. So there's a chance Roshan could do something here. DJ Moore we have as a tricky decision because he's going to be getting Sertan, which is not an ideal matchup for a wide receiver to go up against because Sertan is still good at football, even though the Broncos stink. And Justin Fields is another tricky decision. The Broncos defense is not good, like we've said. So there are some signs here that like it could be a bounce back game for him, but at the same time he's looked so bad that we don't want to call him just a flat out start because it's been brutal for him. You got anything on this game, Yanni?
No, I think just because of his rushing upside and because of the state of quarterback, you're probably starting Fields. But it is worth noting that he's really underperforming this year, like shockingly so.
Yeah.
That's all. Oh. Okay, Ravens at Browns. Ravens with an implied point total of 19, coming back at the Browns at about 21. The Browns are an elite defense, guys. I mean, genuinely, in every sense of the phrase, on 53% of their snaps this year, they are allowing 0 or negative yards. 53% of offensive snaps against them. It is absurd. So they're a vicious defense. They're probably not one you're too excited to start. Guys against, that's why we're starting our studs, Lamar and Mark Andrews, of course. Tricky decisions, Gus Bus, Zay Flowers. Those guys have been productive enough that like a lot of rosters you're probably slotting them. Starting all this trash, that just garbage heap of running backs that the Ravens perpetually roll out every year when their first guy gets hurt. It happens like clockwork at this point. Probably sitting all those guys, especially against a team like this. For the Browns, Deshaun Watson's actually banged up this week. He missed a practice. He registered, I believe, a shoulder injury toward the end of this game last week. So, of course, this is a little bit pending health, but we're going to assume he's going unless the reports take a turn for the worse this week, which means you're starting Deshaun, Amari Cooper. Jerome Ford is simply because he is their lead back. If they get a little lead and they start playing keep away ball, he probably gets fed. He seems to be getting used in the red zone. He's getting some targets. He didn't get a ton of usage his first game. I was actually surprised. But it was such a blowout. They were up by so much and just kind of comfortably in the lead. I almost wondered if they treated him like a lead dog and didn't sit there and workhorse him, and they didn't have to. Hard to say, but certainly worth keeping an eye on his usage in this game, especially while it's close. And then Elijah Moore and David Njoku are tricky decisions because, the Ravens secondary is really rough. They could be a competitive. The Ravens might be able to score some point. I mean, Lamar's so good, who knows. So they're both tricky decisions. I've seen a lot of rosters starting Elijah Moore this week, and with how bad their secondary is, I certainly don't hate them.
Yeah. My only note on this game is this could be, after this game, a sell high window for Deshaun Watson. Last week he went up against the Titans, who just hemorrhaged pass yards, and he had a good fantasy day. This Ravens team is super banged up in the secondary. I could see him having another solid day. If you find a manager that could use a quarterback, try and put Deshaun on him because I still don't think he's good at football. I think the matchups just lined up perfectly for him these last 2 weeks, and yeah.
2 pass funnels in a row. It's definitely a good window.
Yep. And speaking of pass funnels, we got the Cincinnati Bengals going into Tennessee to play the Titans. The Bengals have an implied team total of 22 points, and the Titans have an implied team total of about 19 points. Our starts for the Bengals are the usual suspects: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow. And our tricky decision is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon has been pretty much what you drafted this year. The Bengals offense has kind of been struggling, so the points haven't always been there for Joe. But he just got his first touchdown last week, so that was good. But he is in our tricky decision because this is the Titans. We've said it over and over and over again, and we'll continue to say it. The Titans are elite at stopping the run, and they blow at stopping the pass. This will be a game. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Burrow drops back 60 times on his messed up calf and just throws it all over the yard. So this is why this is a smash spot for Jamar Chase. If you were able to get him in a trade and buy him low, you saw some returns last week, you'll see more this week. I can almost guarantee you. Same with T. Higgins. He's been on and off. It's just like what T. Higgins does, but this is as good of a matchup as any to get him going in. For the Titans, our start is Derrick Henry. The Bengals give up about 5 yards per run this year, and Derrick Henry, He struggled so far, but man, he's really all they have. So we'll start him. Hopkins is a tricky decision. He is the target monster on this team, but they got Tannehill and they're not good at throwing the ball. So he just by default this is a tricky decision for us, and then we're sitting everybody else. This Titans team, while I do love talking about their pass funnel defense, the rest of like their fantasy assets are always just they make me so sad. They make me so sad. They need a quarterback really badly. They need to like get Levis going or something. See if he can like do something. Is this team? Uh, yeah, they're bad. They're bad. They're well coached, but they're bad. Um,
Yeah.
you got anything on this one, Yanni?
Nope. Just two depressing seasons for two teams.
Yeah, and I guess for the record, I think Joe Burrow is a tricky decision this week, just from his calf and the way he's looked. Even though this is a pass funnel defense, there are quarterbacks that I might consider starting over Burrow. But Chase and Higgins are like A1 for me this week. But we'll see, right? After next week, we'll know.
All right, we got Jimmy G and the Raiders coming in around 21 points. Chargers coming back at 27 points. Jimmy was in concussion protocol this week, but it does look like he's going to go, so we're assuming he's going to go. And that means that you're starting Devontae, you're starting Jacoby Myers, and you are starting Josh Jacobs. You really can't bench him anyway. But also, I think this is a really good matchup. Good chance he gets his rushing game going for the first time this year. For the Chargers, you're starting almost everyone with the exception of Quentin Johnson. You're sitting him. It looks like they prefer Palmer over him. You're probably even starting Palmer this week. That's included in everyone, especially with no Mike Williams. Donald Parham is actually, he's been pretty consistent. You know, he's definitely someone that you can plug in at your tight end position. For a tricky decision, it does not look like Eckler's going to go this week. They talked about him having a high ankle. His interview was really funky where he said, he can go forward, but he can't cut side to side, and that was today. So if he's saying that on the Thursday or Friday before game day, I'm not really considering him seriously playing this week. If he does, Josh Kelly's a tricky decision. I think he's had 6 PPR points in 2 weeks. I did start him for, I believe, both of those weeks on one roster. It was horrible and depressing. I dropped him for Mims Jr. So that's where I'm at with Josh Kelly. But there are probably rosters where you're going to roll him.
I'm actually flabbergasted you dropped him for Mims. That's crazy. You dropped a 3 down running back for a guy who gets on the field 7 snaps a game. That's crazy, but hey, you know what? The fantasy points are with Mims right now. So,
yeah, I mean, in that roster, I have James Conner, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, Miles Sanders, and Elijah Mitchell. So I just figured I hate Josh Kelly. I really do. I truly do.
you and Flock both, my friend. Flock is so funny. He hates him. It's hilarious.
He's horrible, dude. I really, after starting him for 2 weeks and like watching him, I really dislike. Not as a person, just as a fantasy asset. I'm sure he's a lovely human being.
Do you remember last week when I was asking you who should I start, Madison or Josh Kelly, and you went, "Oh, for me it's Josh Kelly. It's not even close."
Yes, because it was because that's a spot where he should have smacked. That's the whole problem. That's actually very consistent with what we're discussing now. That's the issue. When there's a matchup where you're like, yeah, get that guy on the field, he'll murder it, and I think he got 3.2, something like that, right? Yeah. I also don't like Madison either.
Madison got me 15 points on my bench, and Kelly got me
He had a
2.
good week.
Yeah.
He had a good week. I'm sorry.
All right, next we got my favorite team, the New England Patriots, going into Dallas to play the Cowboys, coming off a loss to the Fighting Gannons last week. The Patriots have an implied team total of about 19 points, and the Cowboys have an implied team total of 25 points. We have no starts for you on the Patriots. There was some optimism coming into the season about Bill O'Brien getting this team turned around, or at least the offense turned around. It's a little bit better than last year, but it is a wasteland. There is hardly any talent on this team. It's tough, but that's the roster they built, so they have to live with it. Our only tricky decision is Ramondre Stevenson. He was very highly drafted. A lot of people seem to think he's baby Kamara. He's had a disappointing year so far. He's gotten some catches out of the backfield, so he's had some fantasy value, but he hasn't been the player that you drafted or projected, and this is a Cowboys team that has a very good defense. Right now, they are 30th against the rush, so they can kind of be had on the ground potentially. James Conner had some good success against them last week, so I don't know. Like you could. Do I think Ramondre comes around this year? Maybe he has a chance. But
He's a buy low for me. He's a buy low for me. But this is a tough week. It's a
they're
really tough defense.
allegedly the Cowboys can't stop the run. They're 30th against the rush. I just figured that out like a couple days ago. I was like, what? Really? Yeah,
Yeah, but
it's crazy.
it's a tough defense, man. I mean, well, probably James Conner affected that last week, and so did Rondell Moore. Broke out like a 70-yard reverse against them. So like that'll affect their rankings, but I don't know.
Josh Dobbs looked like Michael Vick.
Yeah, that might have just been an outlier game.
Yeah. All right. So for the Cowboys, our starts are Tony Pollard and CD. Those are pretty much the chalk starts that we'll always tell you for the Cowboys. Our tricky decisions are Jake Ferguson and Dak. Jake Ferguson continues to get targets in a position that does not have a lot of great fantasy guys, so he's worth a look. I think it's important to note that the Patriots are one of the top defenses against the tight end. Week 1, they shut out Dallas Goedert. So this is a tough defense for tight ends to go against. But even considering that, like he still had so many targets thus far this year, I think we have to put him as a STD. And then Dak. Dak, I think last week I said that Dak is not a turnover machine anymore, and I will start handicapping him as such. In 1 week, I've changed my mind again. Dak can definitely make bad mistakes, and Bill Belichick is the guy who can scheme him up. So I wouldn't be shocked to see some bad Dak this week, but I don't know. Like, tricky decision. You might have somebody better, you might not.
Yep. Awesome. I get the Niners game. All right. So we have the Cardinals coming in at around 16 points. The Niners coming back at 28. Niners have the highest implied point total of the week, I believe. Actually, I'm sure they do. And so for the Cardinals, I think just based on game script, James Conner and Hollywood Brown, James is probably good for some checkdowns, maybe even some red zone touches. Hollywood, same idea. You're going to be passing a lot. The Niners have 4 injured corners right now. So you probably want to be targeting. And at 4 injured corners in a high-powered offense, meaning game scripts and then no corners, you probably want to be targeting your pass catchers against them. And in that spirit, Josh Dobbs and Zach Ertz are both tricky decisions. There's some rosters where you're probably going to want to get those guys in your roster. I don't know. I think people are putting a little too much faith in Zach Ertz. What did I see? I saw him dropped. Kyle Pitts dropped for him this week. I saw a few other guys. Kyle Pitts was the big one. I saw someone drop Kyle Pitts for Zach Ertz. I wouldn't go that far, but he's probably startable in this one. For the 49ers, you're starting basically everyone. The only 2 people are withstanding health are Debo and Ayuk. Debo is not practicing with a rib and a knee injury. Ayuk is coming off of his collarbone injury. He was practicing this week without his non-contact jersey, so the assumption there is that Ayuk's rolling out. Whether Debo does or not, hard to say. It's just they're in tricky decisions because they're both worth watching for their health. If one of them doesn't go, get the other one in your daily fantasy lineups, and for sure get them in your starting roster. They're going to pop off this week.
Yep, absolutely. I think Kittle is also for daily fantasy too, right? Because there's the big 3 in the pass game.
Oh, no. Kittle eats the Cardinals alive. That's one of his best matchups. Yeah. He's included. Get Kittle out there.
And then my last note for this game, I just think that it's important to note for the podcast. Debo is outscoring Brandon Ayuk this year. So Debo is the fantasy wide receiver 1 in San Francisco right now.
He is.
All right, next we have another just fantastic matchup. We have the Chiefs going into MetLife Stadium to play the Jets and Zach Wilson. The Chiefs have an implied point total of 26, and the Jets have an implied point total of 16 and a half. The Jets aren't getting there. They are not scoring 16 points on this defense. I'll just spoiler alert it for you right now. Our starts for the Chiefs are Mahomes and Kelsey. We're never going to tell you not to start them unless, I don't know, one of them loses a leg, and then they might be a STD for us. Pacheco is a tricky decision. Man, I don't really pay attention to this Chiefs backfield. CEH is like kind of getting in there, right, but not much. So yeah.
Well, Pacheco's had a hamstring he's been dealing with, and then McKinnon and CH come in just in the 5-yard line and in. So it's this really weird system they use, and it's really capped Pacheco's upside. But he's probably the only one that you're looking at week to week. That's why he's listed. The other guys aren't.
For the Jets, we have no starts for you. Sorry. Garrett Wilson is a tricky decision just based on his talent alone. Unfortunately for him, like just the reality for him is he needs to have a quarterback to throw him the ball. And Zach Wilson is probably the worst starting quarterback in the league, and it's just totally tanking his value. Sorry. And then our sits are everybody else, including Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook. This Chiefs defense is much improved. I believe this is by far the best defense Patrick Mahomes has ever had. Um,
Yep.
yeah, this one has all the makings of a not fun blowout. Just is what it is. Taylor Swift will be in the building for all you big football fans that are also Swifties. That'll probably be the most exciting part of the game.
Travis Kelce, it needs to be mentioned. He lays such impressive wood. He's gotten Taylor Swift to watch them play the Bears and the Jets. think about what level of damage that guy does that's worth it to her. It's incredible. All right, you can go ahead and flip to the next.
Well, do you think she knows that each team gets 4 tries to get a first down?
I would guess she's into football a little bit. She's like an all-American girl. I don't know. Dude, I'll be honest with you. I had no idea Taylor Swift was such a star until she popped up on every one of my sports apps for like a week. I had no clue.
Bro, she's like, I don't get it. She's getting like Michael Jackson level publicity. Like this, she is the biggest star like in the music world in the past like 20, 30 years. And it's like, I've never listened to her, so I don't have an opinion on it. But I don't know. She sells out a lot of concerts, I guess. So, okay.
The last song of hers I knew was that one about she's cheer captain and I'm in the bleachers. I think I was a senior in high school.
Oh God, that song's terrible.
Dude, it blew my mind though that like I had no idea. Dude, Tom Cruise could go to these games, or like Jeff Bezos could go to these games. It wouldn't be as big of a story. It's really bizarre. Anyway, Taylor Swift notwithstanding, the next Seahawks at the Giants. Seahawks with an implied point total of 23 points. Giants with an implied point total of 24.5. For the Seahawks, you're starting Kenneth Walker III and DK pretty much weekly. Lockett probably has a good game this week. It's the Giants. Charbonnet, you are going to sit. Even though his usage ticked up, I believe he was at a 48% to 52% split with Kenneth Walker. He's just not getting enough usage to start. Your tricky decisions, Geno and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Jackson Smith and Jigba is probably more of a daily fantasy play, and again, that's really just saying that the Giants are awful, but he's someone you can take a look at. Geno, he was a popular guy to like tag with another quarterback, if you were doing a 2-quarterback draft. And he's been productive enough, and especially in this week, you're probably looking at him, but you might want to look at other options. There's a good chance that they just run the ball and then kind of play keep away, and it might not be very competitive, especially with a banged-up Saquon. For the Giants, you're starting Darren Waller. He's had a really rough start to the season. He's really not looking great, but this is a really plus matchup. He's their best pass catcher. You're not giving up on him yet. It's more that the Giants as a whole haven't looked good, so I do think he's a start this week. You have no sits. Your tricky decisions are going to be Saquon and Daniel Jones. More because Saquon is coming off of what appears to, they called it a high-ish type ankle sprain. I'm not sure what that means. I think that means a high ankle sprain. It was a really weird way they put it. And he looked really rough for like 6 weeks after his last high ankle sprain. So in his first week back, temper expectations if he plays. Daniel Jones is just always a tricky decision because he might get you 30 or he might get you 4. Good luck.
Yeah, you're counting on a Forrest Gump type run. I mean, the good news for him is the Seahawks defense is just terrible. Just a terrible defense. So, I mean, he could have a good spot here. Do I have anything on this game? I guess I'm waiting for Charbonnet to take over the Seahawks backfield, and DK is by no means to me a start every week. But that's a whole longer conversation. But anyways, that's going to do it for us. If you made it through the video, congratulations. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment in the video telling us your favorite Taylor Swift song. And I guess one more thing before we go, just quick housekeeping. The upload schedule going forward is going to be Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, Saturday afternoon. We skipped a couple uploads. We were just, life comes at you fast. But that will be the upload schedule going forward. So subscribe and hit that bell. And if you hit the bell, you'll get the little notification every day at 8 in the morning when these go out. But yeah, thanks again, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, guys. Good luck this week.